How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. We're doing another video on how to prepare yourself for the correctional interview process, things that you need to know, what to expect. I've been getting a lot of requests recently to cover this topic again. Now, guys, by the way, if you go on YouTube and you put correctional officer interview and Tier Talk, you're going to see the ones we've done already. But I figure we're going to complement what we've already covered. And I also have Greg Piper and Soto. They're both very familiar with the recruitment process, what you should expect during the interview process. And I think this will be just another perspective that we could provide. But Greg, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience again?
Sure. My name is Greg Piper, and good day to both of you fine gentlemen. Appreciate you bringing me on today. I'm the Director of Training for Guardian RFID. I've been with Guardian about 3.5 years. Prior to that, I spent 3 years with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department in Chattanooga, Tennessee as a deputy sheriff assigned to the Corrections Division in a 500-bed facility. And prior to that, I spent 9.5 years with the Kansas Department of Corrections, starting as an officer, spent some time in unit team, shift supervisor, and ended as a captain's level position working in staff development.
Yeah, and by the way, Greg, thanks again for all you do. I believe are you still out on the road as we speak?
I'm home today, but I leave again tomorrow morning, and I'll be out next week and the week after and the week after. I'm pretty much down to about 36-hour weekends for about the next month and a half as I hit the road again to get facilities back online and get them up to speed.
Well, if during the route you have anybody that's interested in being interviewed, you can go ahead if you don't mind. You want to interview them, we'll put them on our venue.
I'd be honored to do that. I know that get a lot of good views, and the folks here that are watching really appreciate us bringing some fresh faces on because they don't want to look at you every day.
That's true, dude. I'm starting to run out of things to talk about. I'm a talker. Hey, that was a shot, man. Hey, Soto. Obviously, I know you're busy. Thanks for coming on. This was kind of a last minute, but I know Soto definitely has some experience with recruitment and training. So, Soto, do you mind introducing yourself again to our audience?
Absolutely. Good morning and good afternoon to those, depending on your time zone. But I'm retired Major Soto, also Rutgers professor, getting ready to start and preparing for that summer class, summer sessions. Also an avid Yankees fan, got to represent, I know Greg, he's representing a losing team, I'm sorry to say. But, hey, we're here to talk about this topic, so let's move on. I'm just happy to get into it.
Go ahead, Greg.
I just want to point out that my squad, the Minnesota Twins, did win 101 games last year, and we don't have a right fielder that's complaining that his head hurts all the time. So no big deal. It's okay.
Whoever your favorite team is in baseball, put it in the comments. I'm representing Just a Viable Force. It's a friend of mine's company. Win, lose, regardless. All right, guys, so when we come back from our sponsors, we're going to dive into what to expect. Basically just if you're new and you're trying to enter this field, we're going to try to give you some knowledge that will help you along your way. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talk for you brave men and women that work in corrections. So please, I actually subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor, talk about the interview process, and come back.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description.
All right, guys, and we're back. Okay, guys, so if we're trying to get into this profession, right, and we're really, looking to, let's say, go to a state like California, like New Jersey, because I want to go to the highest level of recruitment, because I want to give people what they should expect. And some states, they may not have that higher level quality when it comes to exhausting all the recruits and really putting them through some form of real intense training. So I thought the best we could do, because it seems to be practices are inconsistent nationally, we could take it from the highest level. And I think that would pretty much be a great way to cover what's needed on a universal manner, I guess. So, Soto, you've been involved in training for many years, right? I mean, most of your career was pretty much in training. What are some of the things that you felt is needed in order to make sure that we get the best recruits possible?
Well, working out of the academy and the recruitment center, people don't understand that it is a very competitive field, right? You take a law enforcement test, no matter what state you're in. We're trying to get the cream of the crop. We're trying to get those guys that score on that particular test 90 and above, so that we get at least, we know that we start off with a good candidate before we even start into the next background checks and, psychology tests and all of this. We want to start off with a good candidate. So in New Jersey, as well as other states that are basically California and other big states, they're using the same process. They're doing these background checks, and they want to start off with a great candidate and then wean off, from that list, the cream of the crop. So as you start off taking these exams and scoring high and getting prepared for those exams, the next level, that's like a phase 2. Now you're getting prepared for that interview. But remember that you are in competition with thousands of other candidates. So it's very important that you stand out, that you make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in order to be that type or that small number that rises to the top.
Now, you mentioned background checks. I thought maybe I can go with Greg first. Greg, what are some of the things that we should be wary about if we're going out for a job in corrections that could be found on our background checks? Because I'm assuming the background checks should be what's first and foremost.
Yeah, we oftentimes have these great candidates who suddenly show up, their background check doesn't match with what their application has said. It doesn't match with their psychological exam, and there's just a lot of red flags that pop up. So if you have things in your past, as many, many people do, don't hide it. Be very forthcoming with those things. If you had a DWI 2 years ago, but you went through a program and you were able to expunge it from your record and you cleaned it up, you made a change, then tell us about that. Be honest with this process. You're going into an area that is law enforcement. We have access to all those records. So I think it's imperative that we've all made mistakes. I think some of my best correctional professionals that I've ever worked with absolutely had run-ins with the law and had maybe some experiences that weren't always stellar because they brought those experiences with them. So that doesn't necessarily preclude you, but it doesn't include you either. So either way, be honest with those experiences, especially with your background check, to ensure that you're very clear and you're very honest with your previous history and any experiences you've had with law enforcement or civil court or whatever the case is.
Go ahead, Soto. I see you have a response to that.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. You cannot be honest enough. Unfortunately, if you're applying for a position in a law enforcement field, just here in New Jersey, I'll give you an example. We don't just do one background check, which is nationwide. We do the NCIC background check, but we also do promise gavel. So even if you say, hey, I wasn't really arrested, I was just detained, or I got a summons and I had to go to court, well, unfortunately, that's all going to come up. So when I tell you that a lot of the candidates get excluded, because we're going about numbers again. You have a small recruitment unit that's going to go over thousands and thousands of applications. So initially, they're going to exclude anyone that has falsified or lied on their application. So you omitting something, be it by mistake or because you think it was 20 years ago and it shouldn't matter, that's not for you to decide. That's for the recruiter, the person, the investigator to decide. So if you don't put it down and they just run a straight up NCIC check or a background check through Promise Gavel to see the courts, what they have on you, and it comes up and you didn't put it on the application, it's easy for me to exclude you for the time being, go on to the next candidate who's being truthful and honest.
Something you brought up is whether, be honest with those, because that Promise Gavel and those NCIC checks, that's a lot of criminal stuff. And some applicants that I've worked with have said, well, this was a civil matter. My wife and I filed bankruptcy, or my girlfriend ran off and I had to, I had some financial problems. So people are like, well, that's not really, criminal behavior. But that's still important that we know that, because if you're susceptible financially, you don't handle your finances very well at home, you get inside the walls and those inmates find that out, they're going to use that against you as well. So yes, we don't necessarily need to know, hey, we're not talking about I'm divorced 3 times, or, I've got 14 girlfriends and baby mamas and whatnot, but some history of any conflict or areas where your financial records or anything that might the inmates be able to find a way into you and find that weakness in you, kind of important that you're honest with that too, because those are areas we're going to need to work with you if you're going to come inside to the corrections industry.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned about obviously remaining honest. Honesty brings consistency. Consistency brings confidence in the interview process. If you're sitting there trying to maneuver around things that you feel that could be looked at badly, but at the end, it's not so much what you got arrested for, because that's important, don't get me wrong, but if you lie about it and they find out, that's where it becomes unforgiven. Like when Greg mentioned a DWI, it could have been something you've taken care of. It could have been something that was in your past, but if you're not honest with it and it gets discovered, you're going to spend more time trying to explain why you didn't say it, as opposed to saying at the beginning of the interview and just be done with it when they asked. So I think that's great, because that's a big question that people ask, is my background check. And, I have these little concerns and, what should I do? Should I tell them? Should I not tell them? And it's like 100% of the advice is going to be, say it, tell them. And this, because regardless, if you're not going to get the job, okay, then first off, you're definitely not going to get the job if you lie about it. And if it's something they're not going to hire you for, they're going to find out anyway. The risk is already there. What do you got, Soto?
So what I'm saying to you is, when I explained that almost 80 to 85% of the people just gets excluded for falsifying or not putting down something that happened in their past, another good thing that happens when you put it down, right? And you're going to get that interview with the investigator or the recruiter. Now you get to explain. Now you get to go into the matter. Hey, I was a young individual. I was influenced by other people, my social upbringing. Maybe I was just trapped in this and that and the other. You get to explain. You justify what occurred, what happened. You moved on. It's been 10, 15 years, 5 years, and now I'm a better person. People change. So if you don't put it down, I, as the investigator, recruiter, I'm not even going to give you that opportunity to explain to me what happened. But if you put it down, comes up on your background, I bring you in for an interview. I say, hey, can you explain to me what happened in 1996? What happened with this? And then you can justify what happened. It does not preclude you from getting hired. It gives you the opportunity to explain it.
Right, and that's why I said I agree, as opposed to people that look to try to hide it right from the get-go because they're so concerned that they're not going to get that job with that one blemish. But having said that, you lying about it is where the weight of it, because now I can't trust you. Now your integrity's in question, and in corrections, you have to have the highest level of integrity. I noticed that you wanted to comment on something that Soto was saying, Greg.
Yeah, one of the agencies that I worked for actually performed a lie detector test, if you will, to check, psychological test to determine whether or not these were going to be honest or integrity-driven individuals. And we had plenty of candidates who would fill out the application. No, I've never done any kind of drugs. Okay, if when you were in college or when you were in high school, if you smoked weed, then just put that you smoked weed. We're not going to arrest you at the interview because when you were 18 or 19 years old, you smoked a joint, you're now 27 or 28 years old. Hey, here's the deal. If you did it, you did it. We continue to find people who are probably pretty good people, but they're going to just, they think they have to have this squeaky clean record. Trust me, There's nobody on this interview, this roundtable that has a squeaky clean record. I don't know a whole bunch of people who are completely clean. So bring those faults and those foibles forward. And if it's something we can work with, we absolutely will. It's not as if we're overflowing with applications to begin with. We do struggle from time to time to fill the roles inside inside law enforcement and corrections, especially due to the high turnover rate. But we still want the highest level of person we can possibly get. So it helps us to not have to scrape the bottom of the barrel, because you probably are a pretty good person. If you're taking the time to watch this video and learn from us, you do matter and you do care about this. So bring those things forward. And I think both of you gentlemen have mentioned it. We want to continue to mention it. Honesty, forthrightness, those are the keys.
Right, and I like how you mentioned also it's the journey. It's okay, you've been through this, but where are you at now? And that's what matters to us. You know, what matters to us is, you know, what you have overcome, because that also shows a great amount of strength. You know, that's, you know, maybe you did come through something in the past, but you have to show me now how you're no longer that person. So I'm not automatically going to judge you from a mistake from the past. I'm going to try to, like Lewis said, look for those explanations to see who you are now and which way you've headed. Because again, people that make struggles, there's progress behind that sometimes, you know, and you need to hear the struggles to see what the progress is about. And also on a touch with the psych stuff that you mentioned, the reason why honesty is also very important is the psych questions will weed it out, because they ask you the questions, like they're same questions, but they're different ways. And what they do is they really look for consistency in how you answer those questions, because if you're consistent and you're honest, you're going to flow right through that psych exam. It's just, you're going to flow right through it, because the questions are just the same question asked multiple times. But either way, if I'm honest, doesn't matter how you ask the question, the answer's going to be the same. But if I start to try to cover up certain areas, then those questions become a bit harder, because I may not be able to realize, like, oh, shoot, I lied about this, and they're asking me this. That's actually the same question, just asked in a different manner. So honesty brings about consistency. Consistency brings about confidence. And again, it all starts with you admitting that you're not perfect, and then going into that interview and trying to explain where the progress is now, where you're at today. I want to ask you guys about home interviews. Some places do, some places don't. I'm not talking about the times we're in now, but let's just say the norm, the practice. A lot of us are concerned about those home interviews. So if your facility practices those home interviews, so basically where this is what we're going to do. We also go to your home and check it out. What do you think they're looking for in the home? You want to go first, Greg, and then Lou?
Well, you're talking about places that show up in the house and do just maybe just visit with you. And they're not looking to see if necessarily you have the super clean house and you're super OCD and organized. Hey, if you are, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a phenomenal officer either. They just want to get a feel for the environment and the energy that's going on. Now, we normally have only done those for higher level positions, entry level positions. We didn't normally do home interviews. We would do just your basic questionnaire, and, civil service exam, behavior-based questions, and MMPI kind of thing. Which I think that might be something we could touch on here in a minute, is what are maybe some parts of the interview that they can look forward to. You mentioned the psych interview. What does that mean? Maybe somebody who's never been involved in one of those, they don't know what that is. But as far as home interviews, we reserve those for more of the higher level positions in our facilities.
I know Lou's going to comment on that. I actually had a home interview that was done, and it was just real quick. They interviewed me, interviewed my family, and they interviewed a few of my neighbors, and then they disappeared as to what they were looking for. I just think they were looking for consistency about who they're hiring. Did they get the same vibe from the family as they did from the neighbors? And I think a lot of the focus was on me. And I think sometimes when people are getting those home interviews, they try to like, hey, Ma, you got to do this, or hey, Dad, or telling their wife, hey, you got to do this, when really they're just looking to find out about you, specifically you, and are you a good family person? Are there any concerns at the home? And, again, with the neighbors, how do the neighbors see you? And you may not even know what neighbors they go to ask. That's the funny thing. But Lou, you're used to doing home interviews, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. At the recruitment office, not only did I go out on interviews, I also sent my investigators to do interviews, home interviews. So what they're actually doing is, one, verifying your address, right? That's one of the main and purposeful. If you go into any law enforcement job, they require that you live in the state, or at least at the time of the application, that you've actually moved into the state, right? If we're talking about state. Municipalities are going towards that aspect too. So that's the first thing that we're looking for, that you actually live in this particular home. Secondly, usually the interviews are not done one-on-one. There's usually 2 investigators coming in, so that they're being very observant about your home. They're not, like you said, they're not looking to see if someone has OCD and that their place is really clean, but there's observations to be made, family pictures that are up on the wall. If the home looks like a happy home. I mean, if I walk in and I have alcohol strewn out or beer cans on the floor, stuff like that, it's obviously going to say something about you, or about your family. So again, those are things that you as the investigator look. And definitely we will talk to your neighbors, right? We may do that before coming into your home, right? To verify that, hey, does Johnny actually live in this neighborhood? What do you think about that person? And you may think, well, man, that's kind of intrusive. And why are you asking my neighbors about me? But, remember, a lot of law enforcement agencies are going to give you some police powers, some peace officer powers. Some places you'll be able to carry a weapon. I need to know that you're a well-rounded individual, that, the police isn't at your house every weekend because you're having a loud party or you're having altercations in the house. These are ways to find out things that never make it to that NCIC or that promise gavel. But, if every weekend we get complaints in the neighborhood, I may go down to your local police department and say, hey, I'm considering hiring this individual. Do you know anything about it? Are there been any complaints about this home? Your neighbors, they'll be, yeah, that guy kicked my dog every time he walks by. Things like that come up.
And would you say that the background checks, the test that we're talking about, that Greg's going to break down a little bit with the psych test and the home interviews, these are all going to be done before the physical assessment if your department requires the physical assessment? You want to go first with that, Lou?
Yeah, I'm telling you that the home interviews are usually almost your last phase, right? You've already gone in and filled out a full application. And I know we're going to get into it, but we're going to talk about social media in a minute and how that affects your application. But all of that has been done already. You might have done the one-on-one interview in the office already. The home interviews is usually almost your last phase before you go into the physical phase of the test, and also, your job offer. So again, these are things that happen as you progress in the hiring process.
That's a great thing you just mentioned about social media. People don't realize that social media now coming in is a very big part of that background check, because that's something that I believe is required now. If you have a Facebook page, you must provide it to the hiring agency. So what are some of the things they look for, Greg?
Well, we're going to look at your Facebook page because we want to know what kind of posts you put up. We actually then will use your Facebook page to go onto your Twitter account. We're also going to maybe check any other social media avenues that we can. We want to know if there's a pattern there of someone who maybe has super political leanings one way or the other. Not that that's going to preclude you, but we want to see what type of statements you're making. Are there racial statements? Are there sexist statements? Are there red flags of any kind? Because we're going to look at those things, and that's imperative because exactly what Lewis said is, a lot of agencies, particularly in county or municipalities, you have powers of arrest. And so it's critical that we know what type of personality are we bringing into the family. You've come in, you did your application. In some places there's an exam, a written exam, which is a basic exam. Then you're going to have your interview. Then we'll start with the psychological exams and start weeding that out. Then we'll get to that point where, okay, they're in that final stage. Now we're going to have the PT exam. Now we're going to have those home interviews. So that's part of the process. But absolutely, if you're making racist statements or really sexist, any offensive type of comments like that on your social media accounts, that's not freedom of speech. Well, it is, and you're right to do that, but it's also the department's right to say, no, thanks, we're moving on.
Yeah, I think the big part is it shows a bias. So God forbid something happens later on and people go to check the integrity of that person involved. They could just pull out that one social media post that said something foolish. And now that social media post, however long ago, it doesn't matter. That's going to be what's going to be put out there when you start getting sued. And, I know, Lou, you had something you want to comment on that?
Well, you have to understand that that's you. You know, if you like to post on Facebook, Instagram, you know, TikTok is the newest thing now. The young people are going on TikTok and putting up videos and short videos and have that music in the background. That all tells about you, right? And unfortunately, you're applying for a law enforcement job. And what's going to tell me more about you is who you hang around with, right? If I see who you're posting and your friends in the background, Greg explained it perfectly, you know, political views, whatever it is, it may not preclude you, but it gives us your frame of mind. We use it as people that are trying to infiltrate. You know, we know that the military, the gangs have been trying to infiltrate the military to get that training. They also try to infiltrate law enforcement because they have other alternatives or other things that they're looking to do once they get into the law enforcement field. So they look at that. What I laugh about sometimes is that people would come in for that face one-on-one interview and we're asking them, hey, we need your passwords for your Facebook account, Twitter, whatever, MySpace, whatever you're using. And they're like, oh, that's my private information. You don't have access to that. I have rights. Well, you're applying for a law enforcement job, a public job, and this is something that they're going to require you to give in order to continue in the process. And some people think they're smarter than anyone else. Let me explain to you. We've seen this over and over and over again. We know all the excuses. Oh, I forgot my password. Oh, no problem. We'll put you on a computer and you can say, hey, I forgot my password. Oh, I don't remember my email. No problem. Well, there's plenty of ways of how to get to your accounts and how to get into your accounts. And once you give that password or you have access to it, we go through all the social media. And that's due diligence, right? We are going to employ somebody. We are going to give them law enforcement power, peace officers powers. We need to do these background checks as thorough as possible. Not only that, let me explain in New Jersey how the process sometimes goes. If you get excluded from a law enforcement list by any department, because I'm going to ask other departments, have you applied to the state police? Have you applied to a municipality? Have you applied to be, you know, a park ranger or something like that? If you get excluded from one law enforcement place, you can use that to exclude the person from another place, right? If they excluded you, they have to have a reason for it. And now I'm going to exclude you for that probably same reason. So you have to be honest. And if you're looking to go into a police department or a law enforcement corrections as a stepping stone, keep that in mind. You want to be as truthful, honest, so that when, other departments pick up correctional officers like every day. We lose people every day to other departments because they know the type of background that we're doing, that they already have somebody that is, diligent, that is somebody that is truthful, that's honest. So they pick them up right away.
The public's going on the word of what the department says. So basically they're trusting that you've exhausted all measures to get the best of the best. So if you don't go to those social media accounts, especially more now than ever, you're not really understanding who that person is, because before that person may have even decided to go into law enforcement, before they decide to clean up their acts, they could have a past, actions that could really define who they once were, that could really create such a bias in how they do their job, the potential to do their job, or how any of their actions could be seen by the public. So basically we're giving you the power to commit to these decisions. We're giving you the power of authority. Now, I just want to make sure that we've exhausted our measure to make sure you're that person. Because if not, the first to get looked at negative is going to be the agency. The agency for not exhausting all measures to make sure that you have the right person for the job. But also on another note that we're probably should go into mention real quick is that exhaustive measure helps the staff, because who are you putting next to me? If you don't go through those exhaustive measures, if you don't go through the social media accounts or check to see if this person is telling the truth, we could be infiltrated. And the moment I'm walking next to this person, something happens, and the person that I need to trust on 100% turns against me. So I think a big part of that academy is also the trust that has to come from the academy to the front line, saying the person next to you is the best that we could possibly get. Greg, would you agree with that?
Absolutely, because it is such a team-intensive environment that we work in. in order to continue to establish that trust and that team first attitude, the folks that are currently inside, they need to know that the folks we're bringing in have been vetted. It's critical because I need to know they have my 6 if something goes wrong, if something goes sideways. We joke all the time about how, the 3 of us, when we're off camera and when Connie's with us and Russ, we give each other a rash of grief. We are teasing each other. We're on each other constantly. And people just don't understand. There's why do you give each other so much grief? And I said, you understand the stress we're under and the environment we're in. We have to make sure we're good. So we rib each other, because at any moment it goes from that to us against 80 or us against a large number of offenders. So we need to know we're good, because when it turns quickly. And so as long as we've established that, and we've got a good friendship and a good rapport going, we know we can be safe. And it is critical when new bodies come in, they're prepared for that. And so this is part of that vetting process that will prepare them for this.
Before we go into maybe some of the questions, just generalized stuff, there's one last thing I want to mention. I would guarantee you that anytime you have an officer that commits to a corrupt act, I would guarantee you the training academy, when they find out word about it, they're going back checking to see who this person was, checking to see if they missed anything, checking to see if, was there something on their social media account that we didn't catch, whatever it is. Because I think to the people that want to bring people in, to the people that invest in that training, they take it personally. And I would like to think, and Lou, I'll ask you first, is that you want to exhaust that measure just in case something happened. You can say, hey, this caught us by surprise too, because these are the things we did. Because doesn't it ever fall back on the academy as well to see if there's anything that you missed?
Yeah, we hear that all the time, when people get in trouble or people succumb to inmate manipulation and stuff like that, they will always go back and say, well, hey, what the academy should have caught on that. The recruiting should have caught on that, right? And even when in this litigious country that we're in, when the department gets sued, right? And I've had to go to court many, many times representing the department and have to talk about what the person was trained in, what the person was actually taught, what the person was actually given as tools to perform their jobs. What kind of background did we do on the person? Why didn't we find out that this individual belonged to these other groups that were, and you have to justify and show that, hey, we have a process and the process has been the same for every candidate. Because remember, some of the places are also under civil service laws that will say, hey, why did you exclude this person but allow this person? So you have to have a process in place that has been proven to be non-biased, that has been proven in court. So even at the beginning, before you apply for an application or you have that application in front of you, in front of the application will say, these are the things that would preclude you from being selected as a candidate. And we may put down that you can only have 2 DWIs in your past, right? But it'll be upfront and telling you upfront. If you were caught for any possible CDS, that if you have anything that was in your past about this minuscule CDS, it'll be spelled out in the beginning of that application. It happens all the time. So that's why people, when they don't put it down, that's one more step that we're going to look at as a recruiter, investigator. Wait, it's right there in the front. You didn't read the application. Another thing that I would tell you is that most people will see an application being like 10 pages, 15 pages long and say, hey, this is crazy. Why they want all this information? And if you miss a section, now they're excluding me because I didn't fill this out or I didn't fill that out. But just imagine, it shows again your character. If you're not willing to sit down and tell us all about yourself and fill out a 15-page application, how am I going to say, hey, this is going to be a good law enforcement officer that's not going to skim on his or her reports and is going to give us all the information that's necessary when incidents occur? That's another telltale sign that, hey, you didn't take the time out. This is you looking for a job and you're not filling out the entire application. Why should I waste my time in making sure that you do everything that's required in order for you to get the job?
Right. And I also think that 100% what you're saying is the agency has to be able to back the individual. They're putting a lot of, investment time, but also the fact that I'm willing to give you these powers to say that you're one of us. So if they don't go through those exhaustive measures, then obviously they get questioned by many that says, well, you could have done more. So for those that think that they can hide who they are, or maybe get upset because the agency is not willing to forgive something where maybe another agency can, it just could be the standards of the agency where the standards are so high that it's like, you know what, we're not willing to take that risk because maybe we fell down that rabbit hole before and we're not doing it again. That's why you can kind of see that in some states they're willing to forgive certain things, in other states they aren't. I would guarantee if you look back far enough, there's a reason why some states have raised their standards, because somewhere along the line something happened and they had to make that immediate change. What's your thoughts on that, Greg?
Yeah, when you work in a staff development capacity or training capacity, Lewis and I have, we've gotten to go back and we get that opportunity to glean from other agencies. We had another facility in the state that I was working in that had an escape involving an officer, and that officer, when they went to charge her, she agreed to get her charges lowered to spill her guts, and she basically gave us about a 45-page manual on inmate manipulation, and that became a tool. Well, then as we started to research and look back on her history, one of the things that we didn't look at the time, and this was again probably 15 years ago, she had a history of multiple relationships, if you will, different men, different types of men, which led us to believe that in her particular case, she was easily manipulated by certain types of individuals. I've also seen it in males. They were manipulated by the crux of having more authority or power inside the walls. But these were after the fact. So learning from our mistakes is something we're going to do. So the more information we have ahead of time will allow us to draw back if something does unfortunately happen.
Right. And now, and by the way, it's great to see that because of those that are in the training academy, they have experience, they should have experience, they're able to kind of see things that regular people wouldn't see. Because this is not just what comes out at a surface level. This is what comes out after you have to dig through layers and layers and layers, and then still have to be able to justify it. Because I guarantee you, when we see something that's not so evident to other people, and then we go to try to explain why that person can't be hired, we have to find a way to translate that to people that are going to oversee whatever lawsuit it is that this person is going to try to put into. But sometimes it's just about the exhausted measure, just about the fact that, you know what, we told you about this. Now if this person gets caught up, you can't say that we don't have a concern, because I'm sure some of the concerns that may come across can kind of go either way. But we act in a field where we have to be universal precaution. If I'm not 100% good with this one person, then to be honest with you, we can't take them. Not in this profession. Like you cannot walk you have to be on one side or the other. You cannot walk the line. If you're on this side, you're no good. If you're on this side and you're good, that's fine. But if you're in that middle line, universal precaution is going to be, I can't take that risk, because that risk could mean that, as you progress, maybe one of my devoted employees who've been in the system for a while winds up getting caught in that risk. And now what happens is hindsight bias is that line can clearly be seen as this person being on that side, and we messed up. This is why I think when it comes to the academy, we put a lot on them to make sure that the people they get are 100% on this side. And if you're not 100%, you can't be 99%, you can't be 98%, you have to be 100%. And I think, and I know Lewis is going to want to comment on this, it's kind of hard to explain when you have that person that is 99% where they need to be, but there's that 1% that is just questionable, and then you have to defend their reasons for not having to take this person.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And during the process and the hiring process, in most places that have civil service laws that they have to comply with, there's many appeal process too. So you can deny a person, but they have the right to appeal. And you as an agency now have to go and justify why you did not select the individual or that candidate. So there's many things. But I know we're trying to keep this video a little short. So I want to give one more advice before we go. And that's as far as employment verifications. every department will always check with not only your current employer, if you're employed and still seeking to go into law enforcement, but your previous employers. So it's very important that, you pay attention that if you have a job and that's not where you want to be right now, it doesn't matter. Do your best job, because that is your best reference. When we call that employer or employee verifications, I know a lot of them are just willing, HR or human resources only willing to tell you, yep, the person was hired here and they work from this date to this date. And that's all the information you get sometimes. But there will be one that would say, you know what, this employee is a very well-rounded employee. And I would be remiss not to tell you that if I lose the employee, you're gaining a great employee, while I'm losing a great one, right? But it's the same thing that and I tell these to my kids all the time, hey, you're working at a fast food restaurant or you're working at any agency, do your best, because you never know. Get to work on time, don't get disciplined at your job, always leave on a good note. Give them 2 weeks notice. Don't just get up and say, you know what, I don't like this, I quit. All that tells about you. So it's a very important thing to know, to note, and to keep in mind.
All right, so before we come into a close, because you're right, I want to keep this short because we want to make sure that people the longer videos get a lot less views because you have to devote more time to it. We're trying to keep this video hopefully under an hour. So we're going to push the physical assessment stuff over to a whole nother day. But there is one last thing I want to add, maybe one question just in general, because we're not going to know the specific questions that could be asked on an interview. But generally, when they're asking their questions, what are they looking for in your response? So, Greg, would you like to go first?
Yeah, well, a lot of departments, agencies are using what they call behavior-based questions. So it's not what is the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution. I mean, that's just learning and repeating. We're talking about situational questions and what was your reaction to it. So those behavior-based questions, and they can be a little intimidating. So I want to give the advice that was given to me, and it's out there. It's on the internet. You can Google it, but it's called STAR. Situation or task. So basically they're going to ask you, tell us about a time that this happened, or tell us about you're in this situation, what would you do? So you have to relate it back to something you've done. So you're going to give them a situation or task you were given, what was the action you took, and what was the result. And remember, we work in a team environment. And the biggest mistake I made was every time I gave an answer, I talked about, well, the team did this and the team did that. You're not getting the whole team hired. Yes, it's important that you're a team player, but you're in the interview room. Lewis mentioned at the beginning, you have to stand out. So this is the one time during an interview that I want to see you be a little arrogant and a little selfish. I need you to talk about what you did. So don't brag on yourself, but at the same time, talk about what portion you played individually as part of that team structure. So tell us what you did so I can see what the situation or task was, the action, and the result. Relax and just be honest with them while giving them a full reasoning as to why this happened. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you.
I like that STAR thing. Situational, task, action, and result. I like that because that's a great way to generalize the questions that they were asked. They deal with situations, tasks, your actions, the result of those actions. Lewis, what's your thoughts on that? What do you think they're looking for when they're asking you these situational-based questions?
Well, again, you can relate it back to that psychological test. They already have that when you're coming in for that interview. So they kind of have a mindset of how you would answer it. But it's one thing to put an answer on paper. It's another one for you to be able to articulate what your response is to a situational question. So I think this is a question that can be posed to all of our viewers, because our viewers, we have some experts out there too that can give us specific questions that they were asked, and maybe we can do another show on just that. If people just write in and tell us, hey, I was asked this, or I was asked about this situation. Me and Greg were talking before this video about specific questions that we were asked when we were going through our hiring process, which is a great thing. But use that STAR, use it, because it's going to ask you, it's going to help you say, hey, I got to think about this before I go on the interview. Let me rehearse, right? That's one of the things that people don't do. If I want to do great at sports, right, people go and practice, right? I don't just go up there and become a home run hitter. I practice at it. It's something that I did. So let's rehearse for our interview. have someone sit across from you and put you in that position. And not, I don't like using like a family member, even though they're the ones that are closest to us, because they know us already. Try to use a friend that doesn't know specific things about you or what your work ethic is, and have them ask you questions like that. Rehearse before going in there. When you go to the interview, you'll be more at ease.
Yeah, I agree. And guys, if you have questions you want to send our way, you can email me at gangianthony@yahoo.com. That's gangianthony@yahoo.com. Or I'm sure Greg and Lou may want to give out their emails in case you have any questions you want to send their way, and then we can go ahead and either do another panel discussion, or we could do individual vlogs. If the question is specifically for Soto or Greg, all they got to do is do a vlog and do an intro, and we send it out so you get the person that you feel is best suited to answer that question. Because again, they have the experience where I was never in training, but I do know good people, and that's why I'm able to be lucky to do a show like this. I'm able to reach out and they're able to respond. So thank you, guys. Do you guys have anything you want to say in closing? Maybe give out your emails if that's possible. Greg?
Yeah, my email, and I'm sure Tony will put it on there as well. It's greg@guardianrfid.com. greg@guardianrfid.com. I'm happy to help and answer questions with those behavior-based questions. I was fortunate enough to sit on several interview boards, both in the civilian world and in corrections/law enforcement. So I'm happy to do that. And I would love to see some examples of some of those behavior-based questions that folks would call in or write into us. And of course, we'll do another video about that and answer those as a group. It'll be a lot of fun because we have such a good time doing this. I think we'd have a lot of fun with that. And also put in your favorite baseball team, because I think that's important, or your favorite sports team in general. I think we need to know what's going on with those people.
That's a little shot there at Lou. Lou, you have anything to say in closing? Maybe if you don't mind giving out the email?
Absolutely. My email is majorlewissoto@gmail.com. Again, Lewis is LUISSOTO. And the next time we get on the video, it'll be NFL teams that we're going for. I'm not going to tell you which one is mine, but I know you probably know already. But again, majorlewissoto@gmail.com. Email us, email Gangi. We'll welcome all the questions and give you the best answers possible.
All right, guys. So thank you guys for oh, wait, hold on. I think Greg's got something.
I'm going to just go on a limb. I'm going to say you're an Eagles fan, obviously, right? I'm going to guess Lewis is not an Eagles fan.
I'm going to guess. I think I know what Lou is. Can I guess it, Lou?
Sure.
I think it's Giants.
Of course. You know we are.
Absolutely.
Giants.
Jets, Jets, right, Lewis?
But sorry, guys. Maybe we'll do a show one day discussing sport teams, and maybe that will be that one show that goes viral. All right, guys. So, guys, if you haven't, the show Tear Talks to you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell is going to notify you every time I post a video. Again, this video was done because it came by request. We do have a lot of new people that follow this channel, so we'll try to give them as best information as we can. We'll touch on in the future some of those questions, maybe specific, and also the physical assessment. As always, guys, stay safe.